Welcome to Gotta Run with Will. My name is Melanie Eversley. I'll be your guest host for today. I'd like to welcome Harry Bright, our guest, who was a member of the groundbreaking New York Pioneer Club, founded in 1936, when the New York Athletic Club and others did not admit people of color or Jewish people. Harry and other members were known for not only being great runners, but also very accomplished people. The club included Ted Corbett, founding member of New York Roadrunners, actor Roscoe Lee Brown, Tuskegee Airman Roscoe Brown, and John Carlos, the runner who's known for giving the Black Power salute at the 1968 Olympics. Harry became one of the nation's foremost middle distance runners from 400 meters to 1,000 yards. In 1954, he won the New York Athletic Club 880-yard run in 1:53 at Madison Square Garden. Later the same night, he ran the second leg for the New York Pioneer Club mile relay with a 48.2-second split, helping the club earn its fastest mile relay for the season. Now, Harry went on to graduate from Seton Hall University and later New York University, coached running for the State Department in Africa and Asia, was president of the New York State Association of Human Rights Commissions, executive director of the White Plains Human Rights Commission, and councilman for White Plains. Wow, that's a long resume, long and impressive resume. I'm really interested in your beginnings. You grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Yes.
A segregated community. Your father was one of 5 Black lawyers in town. Can you talk about that some?
Sure. Let me just stop and think. You know, I grew up during the beginning of World War II. And I think at that point I was 9 years old. And I want to remember one thing I want to share with you. My father took me to see Jesse Owens as he was coming through on a tour. And I got his autograph. But then later on during my athletic career, I met Jesse and I forgot to tell him that I had his autograph. But I still have it, and I looked at it today before I came to meet with you. But growing up in Winston-Salem, in a segregated community, I lived in a protected environment. And what do I mean by that? It was protected by my family and by the teachers in my community. And one of the interesting things was in my elementary school, our principal prided himself in his handwriting, and we were all taught to write using what was called then the Palmer method. And I'm appalled now as I see young people, when they hold a pen, they choke it to death instead of writing the way we were taught to write. But I don't expect everybody to do what we did then, so I accept where I am now and where they are. But it could be done a better way. But let me just continue. I grew up in an environment that was full of art. My mother was a classical musician. And as I grew up at 5, I played the violin. And we had, every spring, we had our spring teas where we dressed formally, the young ladies in long dresses and the men in white jackets and bow ties. We were formally prepared. And we had string quartets and sonatas and things like that. That's what I grew up with. So I was not really exposed to sports because we didn't have it in our school system in the first place. And when I went away to school, I went to a private high school in North Carolina, and that's when I saw a little bit of sports. We used to, in the fall, we'd take this long run down this dirt road to the dairy where we used to get our milk from for the school. And it was maybe about 2.5 miles, and we'd run down there and run back. And I thought it was fun. So I would always run, and I would always be the first one back. And each year that happened, but it never dawned on me that I would end up being involved in track because I was in the choir and I was in the orchestra and I was just busy doing other things. But eventually I did become involved when I went to Howard. And of course, I knew that my father was the runner and he was captain of the track team when he was at Howard. And so I got there and I decided to run, and it was interesting. It was fun. it was easier than playing basketball. And so for my first 2 years at Howard, I competed in the Penn relays, and our team won in the class mile relay championship both years. And I finished second in the CIAA half mile run, and our mile relay team won each year. And then I got this chance to go to Seton Hall. I went because my parents said, you know, the world's changing, and you need to be prepared to deal with these changes. And so they wanted to put me into an integrated environment.
And timeline, this was in the 1940s.
1948. And my father had seen Phil Thigpen and Charlie Slade run at the Penn Relays when they were at Seton Hall Prep. And he said, I think that would be a nice school for you. So we chose Seton Hall. And I loved it.
Okay.
Because when I went, it was a college. It was smaller than Howard, and it was all boys. So I had no distractions at all. I had my schoolwork and track. I couldn't run the first year with the team because I was a transfer student. And so during the indoor season, the coach would enter me in all of these handicap races at 1,000 yards. I started out at the beginning of the season with the full handicap. By the end of the season, I was running from scratch, and I had won every 1,000-yard race during the indoor season that I entered. So the coach then offered me a scholarship. So I called my parents and I said, Mom and Dad, you don't have to pay for me anymore. So the rest of my college at Seton Hall was
just
a free ride.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And I just, I enjoyed it.
Yes.
I enjoyed it.
Now, I've heard you talk about how your time at Seton Hall was a pivotal time in your life. As you grown up in a segregated community, kind of protected, and you went to Howard for a year at HBCU.
I had to go to Howard because that's my parents
because that
were
was your
Howard
family's
graduates.
school.
Yes.
Your time at Seton Hall, you were exposed to the world.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, I can remember the first day that I got there, and I met my teammates, and we all decided to go into South Orange to a restaurant. They didn't want to feed me. And my teammates said, well, we won't eat, and we left. That was my first exposure.
Yes.
Later on during the year, we got an invitation to the Florida Relays. And they said, well, you can't bring any of your black students. And so, well, we are a team. We won't go. So those were my first experiences there. In 1948, when I became a member of the Pioneer Club.
Actually, I wanted to ask, those were also the years where you became aware of the Pioneer Club and began seeing some of the runners. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I met all these runners and saw them when I was running and competing in all of these handicap races. And I decided I wanted to be a part of this team. And so I joined that team the summer of 1948. We were going to the junior AAU championships at the University of Maryland. But we could not live in the hotels at that time.
Right.
So Roscoe Lee Brown, the actor, a Lincoln University graduate, made arrangement for us to stay at Lincoln University in Oxford, Pennsylvania. And we stayed there and drove from Oxford, Pennsylvania to Maryland each day.
This College Park, Maryland, right?
College
right outside
Park,
of D.C.
Maryland. Yes.
What was that, about an hour, hour and a half?
Yes, about an hour and a half, so yes. So we did it that way.
Okay.
And it was a wonderful experience because within the Pioneer Club then, I became in touch with some wonderful people from NYU. I mean, I can call names: Reginald Pierman, Hugo Mayako, Dick Mayako, Jim Gilhooly, and then Von Elling, who was the coach. And Von Elling and Joe Yancey were close.
Right.
It was a time when the New York Athletic Club was not open. to people of the Jewish faith or African Americans or other minorities.
Right.
Well,
right.
now that has changed.
Yes.
I'm pleased that that has changed, but it was not that way when I was an athlete. So we had to do it a different way.
Sure.
And in the Pioneer Club, we stressed the importance of individuals as human beings and the respect for each other. Each day at the end of our training, Joe Yancey would call us all together to talk about the responsibilities of us as human beings. Then the older members of the Pioneer Club would address the younger members as role models.
Yes.
And of course, I listened to them, and eventually I became an older member. And so I was doing the same thing that they were doing.
Well, you
the
told an
young
interesting
people.
story about your
And,
relationship with John Carlos.
Well, John Carlos, and people should realize, John Carlos was a born leader. In high school, John Carlos created, I want to say this in a nice way, John Carlos led a movement to improve the quality of treatment and the service in the restaurant, in the cafeteria in his high school. And it became successful. After that, John and I became really close. My goal for John was, you're naturally born, you're a natural leader. I want you to continue doing things in a positive way. And when you stop and think about it, raising that hand was negative at the time, but it became positive.
Yes.
When people realized why it was being done. That's my personal story with John Carlos. I also had some other opportunities or experiences with discrimination. In 1951, after I graduated from Seton Hall, I was called into the service. On my way to Fort Jackson, we stopped at a restaurant with all of the inductees, and they told me I had to go to the back door to be served. Well, I refused to go to the back door, so I got back on the bus. And I went on to Fort Jackson, September 19th, 1951. And when they called for us to step forward to take the oath to go into the service, I almost didn't do it because I was not a happy camper at that time. But I was chicken. I did step forward. I took the oath.
Okay.
But when I got into my basic training, and at the end of each day, they would ask the recruits or the soldiers questions you should answer, and when they'd come to me, I would always say, I don't know. So one day, one of the officers came to me and said, "Soldier, what is your problem?" And I said to him, "Sir, I don't have a problem, especially with the Koreans. The Koreans didn't tell me I had to go to the back door to be fed at a restaurant. That problem happened right here in the United States. My problem is here. We need to address that problem." And he walked away.
Reminiscent of the statements that Muhammad Ali made.
Yeah, he never bothered me. This is before Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
He never bothered me from that point on. So I made my way in the service.
Okay.
And I could write a book.
Yes.
But I'm not going to do that because there's so many things I did in the service that I should not have done.
Okay.
I can share one. I couldn't do push-ups because I was never very strong, So the sergeant made me run. So I said, "Sergeant, are you sure you want me to do that?" He said, "Run down there, soldier." So I ran down and this long distance he told me, and I came back, and he left me alone. And a couple of days later, we were doing our physical fitness test. You have to do all these exercises and things, and they had a little part in there where you have to do a shuttle run. You run so many yards down, and then you come back, and you do it again. So I did that, and they timed each soldier. So when he timed me, he looked at his watch, and he looked at me, and he made me run it again. So I just ran it faster the second time. So he looked at the watch and he made me run it again. So I ran faster the third time. So then he calls the colonel over and asked me to run it again. So I ran faster the fourth time. And at the end of the day, I was the guide arm bearer. I had the responsibility for carrying the banner as we marched back to our headquarters. Sure. And I was marching next to the colonel, and the colonel said, "That was a fine demonstration today, soldier." I said, "Well, thank you, sir." He said, "How would you like to be on the track team?" I said, "That's a good idea, sir." Mm-hmm. He said, "Well, you won't be able to finish basic." I said, "That's right, sir." And we marched on, and the next day,
okay, that works.
the next day, I end up in a barracks with a ping pong table, a pool table, and no more basic training. That worked out fine. Yeah. And finally, we had the Fort Jackson track meet, and I had a buddy there from Lincoln University, Jim Cook, mm-hmm. and Jim won high jump, the javelin, the shot put, and the discus. Mm-hmm. Because he was a decathlete anyway at Lincoln University.
Sure.
So I won the 400, the 800, and the long jump, and I had never done the hop, step, and jump, the triple jump. Mm-hmm. So I asked them, "How do you do this?" And they told me how I did it, and I won it. Okay. And then we went to Camp Gordon for the 3rd Army track meet. Mm-hmm. And of course, Jim and I we did the same thing, and we repeated in the 3rd Army. And I won the 400, the 800, and triple jump, and Jim won all the field events. Mm-hmm. And then we came back, we had the Fort Jackson team, and our track team was so good that they had the All-Army meet at Fort Jackson. And there I won the 400 meters, I won the 800 meters, the 200 meter hurdles. I'd never started hurdling until I was in the Army. Yes. I won Amazing. That, and then I won the 400 meter hurdles. So I said, wow, these are 2 new events. Mm-hmm. So I really fell in love with those events, and I stayed with them. And that moved my career forward. I finished 3rd in the nationals in the 400 meter hurdles. That was part of the times that I got a chance to travel Europe, Asia, and Africa with the AAU teams.
Mm-hmm. Right, you talked about
Liberia, Nigeria, mm-hmm. and are you ready? The Gold Coast, 1953, just before it became Ghana. Mm-hmm. I was there. Wow. Yes, right. Yes. Right. And I went back later with Operation Crossroads. This is a program that started 60 some odd years ago. It was founded by Jim Robinson, a Presbyterian minister, mm-hmm. Here in New York. It was the progenitor of the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. And when I was in Cambodia, if Sihanouk had accepted the Peace Corps, then I would have remained in Cambodia as head of the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. But then we came home, and I started teaching in Mount Vernon. And at the end of each school year, I would get a call from the State Department, and I would end up in the French-speaking countries of Africa.
Yeah, I was hoping you could talk something about
and coaching
that time
in Senegal, Mauritania, Mali. Mm-hmm. And those were wonderful experiences. I enjoyed them very much.
Now, I remember you talking about how you had to devise certain methods to communicate with the folks because there was a language barrier.
It was a real beginning. Mm-hmm. 1959, it was before the war, but mm-hmm. things were, happening, beginning to happen. Mm-hmm. Yes, mm-hmm. Yes. But while there, I wrote a track and field manual, and it was entitled Piste et concours pour les débutants, track and field for beginners. Mm-hmm. And it was used there and then in the French-speaking countries of Africa when I left. Those were wonderful experiences for me. I enjoyed those immensely.
Obviously, they were very fulfilling. It seems as if other countries have this pull on you. What is it that has made you feel fulfilled about teaching running overseas and just being there, interacting with people?
Well, the teaching was running. That's what I was there for. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that happened, when I was in Cambodia, it was during the sit-ins. Mm-hmm. Martin Luther King and all, those sit-ins were taking place here. And I was there. If I had been here, I probably would have been involved in those sit-ins because my brother was involved in the sit-ins in Winston-Salem when he moved from Greensboro to Winston-Salem. My father defended them in court at that time, and I'm over there in Cambodia, and they're seeing all of this, and I'm working through the U.S. Information Service, which is part of the State Department. And I'm saying to the Cambodians, what you're seeing in America now is democracy, true democracy in action. This could not happen in any other place in the world. That was my way of being part of that movement.
Sure. And you must have had a real window into it because, you know, I know your father went to Howard Law School.
Yes.
A lot of his contemporaries
Yes.
were people who helped change the country.
Yes.
And a lot of your contemporaries.
Yes.
So you must have had heard a lot of stories about what was
I
happening
heard a lot of
here.
stories. And then, you know, as I moved on in my life and became the, well, when I joined, was elected to the city council in White Plains, we would consider that a historical movement because I was the first African American elected to office in the city of White Plains. And my whole time in office, my concern was that I represent everybody in this city.
Yes.
We are elected at large, which means we have a responsibility for everybody. So there are no districts in our city at all. And I wanted people to know, particularly people not of color, I wanted them to know that I had their interest too, because we're all human beings.
Yes.
You know, I live by the oneness of humanity, and that's what we all have in common. So anytime I address a problem, I'm trying to address the problem and solve that problem so that it's mutually beneficial to all people. And I've lived that way. I don't know any other way to live. That's been my life.
Yes. Now, and you've also been chair of the Human Rights Commission.
Yes.
In White Plains.
Yes, I was chair of the Human Rights Commission. We created an organization called Embracing Diversity and Ending Racism, which provided opportunities for study circles all over White Plains to address discrimination and for people to really come together to share their experiences. And that was very, very successful.
Yes. Well, I know
because we moved into the school system, and we worked with the teachers and students as well. That's what the whole Human Rights Commission is all about.
Right, right.
You know, we're there to enforce the state human rights laws, but we're also there to help people understand that there's a better way to do things.
Yes.
And I can give you a very simple example. When I was the director of the Human Rights Commission, a young man came to me who was visually impaired and told me that he had been denied access to a health club.
Really?
Yes.
On what?
I got up from my desk and I said, well, let me go with you.
What did what was the club's reasoning, or what was their excuse?
The dog. He had his dog. And he had to have that dog to get around.
Right.
I went to them and I explained to them that you may not be aware, but by doing what you're doing to this person, you're in violation of the state human rights law. He is allowed to have access wherever he goes. I just want to make you aware of that. And if we can settle this right here, then it's fine. The art of persuasion, I always tried to do that. I always tried to build bridges.
Yes.
And that was it. My athletic career for me was just part of my life.
Yeah.
All of the things that I've done after being an athlete are the things that mean the most to me.
What I find fascinating about you is you have all these parts of your life, you know, very accomplished academically, professionally, star, nationally known runner, violinist. Still, you play with your orchestra.
Yeah,
you play golf. Still,
Yeah.
I understand that there's something that you'd like to share that kind of brings might help others, see you
Yes.
in that light. So,
And I share this with all the people with whom I'm in touch, and especially young people. And it's what we called, and when I was in school, the Palmer Creed. And this is the way it goes. I have to live with myself, and so I want to be fit for myself to know. I want to be able, as the days go by, always to look myself straight in the eye. I don't want to stand with the setting sun and hate myself for the things I've done. I don't want to keep on the closet shelf a lot of secrets about myself and fool myself as I come and go into thinking nobody else will know. The kind of man I really am, I don't want to dress up myself in sham. I never can hide myself from me. I see what others may never see. I know what others may never know. And so, whatever happens, I want to be self-respecting and conscience-free.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. One last question for you. Any parting words for the runners of today? Any advice?
Yes. Keep running. Love what you're doing and never give up.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. Let me also wish you an early happy birthday because you're going to be 89 next week.
Next week,
June 28th. Any big
June
plans?
28th. Well, my only plan and my goal is to continue shooting my age. Shot 89 last week,
Okay.
twice.
All right. All right. And that's twice a week that you play? Once a
Play
week?
3 times a
Three
week,
times
Monday,
a week.
Wednesday, and
Okay.
Friday, if my wife will allow me to do
Okay.
so.
All right. All right.
But those are the plans.
All right.
And golf is I love golf.
Yeah.
Golf and my violin are the things that I do now.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, I know you're incredibly busy. Thank you for carving out some time to be with us today. Harry Bright, former member of the Pioneer Club, former State Department coach, former chair of the White Plains Human Rights Commission. Really appreciate your insights that you shared with us today. And also want to just thank Will Sanchez for the opportunity to guest host Gotta Run with Will. Thanks very much.